All right, so just to start off, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Erica, she, her pronouns, and I am the new, quote unquote, new executive director here at AFO. I joined in December, and so, I've been a fan and a follower and a former kind of business partner with AFO when I was the director of Design Museum a few years ago. So I have known and loved the work that AFO has been doing for a long time, but for full disclosure, this is my first full year of being able to see all of our programs and projects in full in the execution, the production and execution of them. And so there are, potentially some questions that I don't personally know the answer to, and I'm learning right along with you. But we have two folks on the call today as well, Kwang and Jen, who will be able to answer any and all questions. They are both former fellow recipients or fellowship recipients, fellows, and are on our selection committee as well. So they are very, very well versed in the VEB fellowship and can answer any questions and share their personal experiences, both from a fellow side and from a selection committee side. So just to kick it off, this is one of the programs of AFO that has been around for the longest. It was established in 2001. So we are on our 23rd year of administering this program, which is pretty incredible. And as Kwang and I have talked about, it's a pretty significant amount of money that we're able to distribute to people who are kind of mid-career and looking to advance their career, advance their professional development. So we love this as a program for AFO. We are looking to kind of within our mission and our values, we're looking to provide opportunities and access to the AEC community all the way from elementary school students through, basically retirement. And I think that, a lot of concentration can be held within the K-5, maybe, through through college programs with scholarships. But then once you get into the professionals level, you may or may not feel fully supported by other organizations in the community. A lot of it needs to be self-driven. And so I think that this is just one of the really incredible, valuable programs that AFO is able to offer to the community to continue your growth and development as professionals and as kind of mid-career professionals. So like I said, I think that this is, we've been around for so long, we've been doing this program for so long, but we are constantly learning. And this is something that over the last 9 or so months since I've come on board that I've been so impressed with AFO by that, we have this longevity behind us, but we're also looking to learn from our communities, to respond to our communities. And I think that this program has done that as well to make sure that we're being able to, continuously give voice to some of the people who have not been given the microphone for a long time and give more access to this sector in this field. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Kwang, who is both on our board and he is the chair of the selection committee. And so, like I said, he is a very knowledgeable person within this program that we run. And he's going to go through some of the eligibility requirements and some of the history of the program, and then talk a little bit about his experience with it too. So Kwang, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Erica. Yeah, and then I just want to say, after I have a few slides that I'll present that go over exactly what Erica talked about, and then we'll turn it over to Jen as well to talk about her experience. So it'll be me and then Jen, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end of it. Hopefully it'll go fast because we do like to emphasize the questions, and I know that that's kind of an important part. But I'm going to begin by talking about the fellowship a little bit broadly. This is what I'll be talking about. I want to talk about the eligibility, of course. I know that there are always questions around, who should be applying or who we're looking for. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I'll go over a little bit of the proposal guidelines. I think the big thing to kind of just make sure we emphasize here, it's a $25,000 award. It's a grant for you to do with what you propose in your proposal. And I think that's a really amazing thing. There are very few awards in architecture that are at this scale, that have this broad of eligibility. I think that's just an an important and amazing thing to kind of emphasize. I will talk a little bit about my application and the work that resulted a little bit. Will I'm not afraid of shame, so I just kind of will show you exactly what I proposed, and then kind of go over what resulted from it. I'll talk about, Jen will talk about her work and her result of her AFO fellowship as well. And then we'll go into a little bit and talking about the transparency on the selection committee, as well as going into the Q&A. So all this information I'm pulling from the website, essentially. If you go to af-oregon.org fellowships, this is a screenshot of the page that you will find there. All the information that I'm going to be presenting about the award is there on the website, and then the links for how to apply are there as well. Again, it should be noted that the deadline is October 22nd this year. So just make a mental note of that if you are seriously considering applying, and I highly encourage it. So with regards to eligibility, the eligibility is flexible. And I think that's kind of a wonderful thing. We structure the Evera Bailey Fellowship in the AFO, like Erica said, to kind of focus on the professionals in our community. So within the design, engineering, and construction communities, we are seeing the Evera Bailey Fellowship as part of the professionals part of that. So we are looking to emphasize those applicants who are in Oregon, who are at a point of inflection in their career. So the eligibility is flexible, but we do say that there is emphasis on that particular kind of applicant who is at a specific moment in their career. Now, for the guidelines for understanding how we judge proposals, basically, as a shorthand, what I often say is that we're looking for impact that we can see demonstrated to the applicant, to the profession, and to the greater community. In broad strokes, I would say those three things are kind of how we judge. We're looking to essentially distribute these funds that we have the wonderful privilege to be in charge of, to an applicant who can potentially have a lasting impact on the greater community, the profession, and of course to themselves to a small degree too, or no small degree. Because of that, because of those guidelines of impact, part of the proposal, as you guys are kind of considering your proposals or crafting your proposals, part of that means dissemination of your ideas. Impact to the individual is of course important, but we're also looking for impact beyond that as well. So having embedded within your proposal an idea, an effective idea for the dissemination of what you will propose to work on is important as well. So from my point of view, and this is completely personal, and this is not kind of kind of the official AFO Evera Bailey Fellowship stuff, but from my point of view, kind of the stuff that excites me and the things that I like to kind of tell people when I talk to people outside who are thinking about applying for this proposal is, there's a lot in the built environment that needs attention, and that needs kind of really, some good devoted thinking and care. And I think that is a wonderful thing to key into. If you think of like all the things that you have kind of gathered in your time as a professional, think about how we can then, start to identify certain elements of the built environment that could use your experience and your perspective as a professional in the design profession or the construction profession to apply and to key into some of those things, and to also key into, one of the things that I think, with all these professionals, we all go into architecture, we go into construction. I think loving the built environment and loving the result of craft and care in buildings, and to key back into that, to key into the curiosity, the wonder, and the inspiration that drove you into design or construction, to then apply those to the things that we see in the built environment today that could use a lot of attention. And the third thing that I would like to say as advice is, be a good project manager, right? And so $25,000 is a significant chunk of money. And managing that effectively within a time frame that you have is part of your job as a project manager, taking that resource that we will provide to you and utilizing it effectively. So taking care of your budget, taking care of your timeline, those are the things that we ask for as proposal submittals. And so making sure to kind of put due emphasis on those things as well helps proposals stick out. So I'll talk a little bit about my proposal just so you guys have an idea. And this is not at all to say that it's an ideal, proposal at all. I don't really feel that it was, but I'll just kind of give you an idea of kind of what I was thinking about, and perhaps it can be a segue to questions at the end of the talk. But when I first moved to Portland, after a long career on the East Coast, one of the things that struck me was that there was actually this rich history of material development here in Portland. I think now because of mass timber, back in 2016 when I applied, mass timber was not really well known. But there is a history here that I think now people are a little bit more aware of, that we had a lot of, the Pacific Northwest had a big role in material technology development, particularly at the beginning of the 20th century. So for instance, plywood was invented here or first showcased here in St. John's for the 1905 World's Fair. And I found that was really kind of amazing. Like, who knew plywood was invented here in Portland? And this is an early photo that I found about it. Part of the way that I came to is because I worked on advanced materials and architecture. And in Seattle and around, in part of the Pacific Northwest, there's actually a really vibrant carbon fiber and composites material industry as well. And this is because of Boeing, obviously, but it is an industry of material research and development that is actually it leads the world in material development and technology right here in the Pacific Northwest. So between our histories of wood technology and composites technology, we actually have a really rich history of material technology development in the Pacific Northwest. And I wanted to key into that and use that as part of, as kind of the, the inspiration for my proposal. Around that same time too, there was a university in Germany that was doing a lot of research on automation and advanced material technology and computational design. And they were creating, pavilions like this one, which was built by drones. But I wanted to go and visit that university and, perhaps use that travel to Germany as well as kind of, the Pacific Northwest heritage and material development to create my own proposal. So my proposal was essentially three things. I would travel and study. From that, I would design and build a chair, and the funds were really great for that, right? Because as you guys well know, prototyping designs is expensive. And then I would write about my experience and perhaps generate an article that I could then search for publication for. So I did that. I designed a chair using technology and tools that I had kind of familiarity with because of my professional involvement. Was able to engage a fabrication shop in the design and in the fabrication of this chair. These are photographs of me kind of taking the chair through the process of development and fabrication. And then this is the final result, which is the chair that still lives at my home today. The second part of that, of course, was to develop an article. And so I was able, while I was thinking about studying materials, going to conferences about materials in Germany and thinking about computational design, I published a couple of articles in the Architect's newspaper about material innovation. And about innovation a little bit more generally in architecture. And all of this was because of the funds and the time that was granted by the AFO's Evera Bailey Award. So all of this work was kind of seeded by this amazing fellowship. I then, because I wanted to, I created a book that detailed the process and the theories that I was working on. Otherwise this stuff sits in your head. So I found that putting it out into a book was a great way to kind of document some of the stuff that I went through. And I found actually towards the end of the year that I had a lot of material. A lot of it was from, my prior experience as a practicing architect working in professional firms. A lot of it was because of the Evera Bailey Award and Fellowship and, the amazing gift that it allowed me to travel and to study for a dedicated time. So I started to not only just perhaps write an article and publish it, but perhaps gather the materials to, to form a book proposal. So I did. I gathered materials to form a book proposal, and this book was actually published 3 years ago in 2020. It actually was published by Berkhauser. So all the material that was gathered for that I was working on during the Evera Bailey Fellowship resulted in not only that chair you saw, but this book that was published, and you can get it on Amazon today. But so that was the result of the fellowship. Um, Starting with an idea of looking at the history of material innovation in the Pacific Northwest, and tying that into an idea of, writing about it, and, but, also, exercising design, right? Because in my opinion, theory should be melded with design. And for those of you who are interested, I've since taken a lot of the insights that I developed while working on that book, and I've started my own company, which provides AI technology for architects and developers. And I'm working on that now. So that has all been kind of hinged by the fellowship that the AFO provided. But that's my work. I'd love to turn over now to Jen to talk about her work and her fellowship with the AFO.
Thank you. Thanks, Quan. I think it's like the second book, right, from Fellows, but the first to be published. It's
Yeah, the first VEB award was for a book, but I think it was published after my book, and that was 20 years ago. So it took,
right. So
yeah.
self-paced. I love it. I don't necessarily have any slides, but I will just chat about my journey as well. So I was the 2018 fellow, and I was selected after submitting for the fourth time. It wasn't consecutively in terms of my submittal, but the first two submittals were on a different subject than the last two submittals, if that makes sense. So initially, I had really wanted to look into how could creatives and craftspeople have more connection to architects and designers, so that perhaps some of these unique qualities and projects weren't VE'd at the final stage because they weren't integrated earlier in the process. So that those were the first two. And I do have to say that my submittal at those points wasn't as organized as the last. So that could have had something to do with it. But then I paused, and I realized what was really starting to kind of take up space in my head at that point was the idea of looking at gender inequity in architecture and not having as many women in leadership roles at firms, although our graduating rates were equal to men. So, at the time, building up to my submittal, I was part of the forward committee at our AIA Portland chapter. So that's the Forum for Women in Architecture and Design. And the Equity in Design organization out of San Francisco had been coming out with surveys about the profession that asked, some really tough questions about where the inequities were. And one of the main things that I kind of latched onto, just based on my own experience, was the fact that there was a broad spectrum of people, mostly women, that felt like their education, or sorry, their their experience after, how do I say this? Sorry, their lack of hands-on education was impacting their experience after college. And they felt like they were being moved into more of a project management, multitasking versus designers. And I wanted to really dive into that in terms of what was working at the academic curriculum level, and then versus the professional level, and where those gaps were. So I submitted initially with that idea, thinking I, I had really high hopes, and I feel like my end goal was to create some kind of a design, build, construction camp in Portland. It was just a lot, and I was told feedback afterwards, like 25K might seem like a lot, Jen, but you really need to kind of rein in the expectations and what you can actually do, which was really helpful advice, because working, full time, and, having a family and just all the rest of the stuff, it's really up to you how much you can put time into this. So with that in mind, I thought, okay, well, what kind of impact do I want to see, or do I feel would be really successful in 1 year's time? And that is actually the submittal that gained the fellowship. So specifically, the award, was to research gender inequity within the profession of architecture, including the barriers women face with gaining construction knowledge. So that was kind of the formal title. And the strategy that I laid out for myself, similar to what Kwan was focusing on, included 4 main efforts, starting with research of, again, existing training programs and academic in the private sector. The second was just outreach locally and more broadly to individuals and organizations to gain insight. The third was investing my own personal effort into classes and just completing construction related types of efforts, and seeing what was out there, but actually doing the work as well. And that also included some travel to participate in the Yestermorrow Carpentry for Women class in Vermont. And then the end was, the final initiative was really to create kind of a hub or a database of this information, and then start curating classes and information and opportunities that would move forward towards reducing those barriers. So that was what I was seeing as my big picture in the end. And that is what designersbuildpdx.org, that site, is related to. So unfortunately, at the end of my tenure, when these more hands-on classes were really supposed to take off and collaborations, was when COVID started. So that whole thing didn't really come to pass as much as I would have liked to. But since then, I've gone on to start my own firm, and I still keep this idea of actually doing some type of hub with construction and supporting women in the profession towards hands-on training as something that I would really want to do and would like to do further on in my career. So I think, to me, the fellowship allowed me the time to really dive into this issue and create those connections that I think in the future I'd like to think would could come about with this kind of format. So, but for me, I think I would just like to end with the fact that just having that persistence and organizing your thoughts, I think in the end, just having a really clear layout and organizing how am I going to get from like A to D at the end of the year, if I have like 4 big milestones, and how long should that take, and just kind of work backwards from where you see yourself wanting to go. So that was really helpful for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think, to piggyback off Jen's comments, I think that was really good advice, in the sense that the AFO is not going to be checking on the fellows throughout the year to see if they're doing what they said they do, but it's kind of like we provide you with the opportunity to gather your thoughts and see where they lead. So there is a lot of flexibility that you guys possess as fellows, and I think that is something that you should feel as slightly liberating. You don't have to have a really, kind of documented and itemized plan for the proposal. It's more about giving yourself the time, the space to work with what you have. I did want to say a little note about the transparency on the selection process in case there are any questions. I hopefully can address them in advance, but there is a selection committee that will be reviewing the proposals. I'll let you know that the selection committee is chosen by the AFO leaders, and we serve limited time terms. Our goal is to work with the AFO board and leadership to help, guide the process, but also do the administrative work of reviewing the proposals that work best within the goals of the VEB fellowship that is within the AFO. So all of the criteria that we are working with, we try to be transparent and upfront about. They're not super defined, but that is kind of the wonderful benefit of it too. You can see everything that we've been workshopping as what we want the VEB to serve, as well as what the AFO serves on the website. That is the same material that we kind of constantly refer to when we are reviewing proposals. Is this proposal doing what the VEB says it wants to do within what the AFO is trying to do? So as a note of transparency, that is the selection committee. We are a group of professionals that are selected by the AFO to help run the VEB award. And with that, I guess, now is a great time to turn it over to questions, I think, right? Unless Erica, there's anything else we can talk about?
Yeah, I just had a quick little compilation of some of the, we've been running these info sessions for quite a few years, and my colleague Candice went through a handful of them and pulled some other quick tips from other past fellows. So I wanted to read those off for you in addition to the wonderful advice that both Kwong and Jen were able to share. And thank you both so much for sharing those lessons. And I think that some of these might be a little bit repetitive from what they've said, but just to kind of, get a little bit more experience and robustness in this conversation. So one was tell your story. We want to know who you are, you as a whole person, show your expertise in the subject and the personal impact. Follow your passion and inspiration, express that in your application. We want to know why this matters to you. The impact on the profession, how this will advance the whole built environment industry or the community at large. Kwong and Jen both talked quite a bit about that. Clear work plan, clear goals. Be realistic about the amount of funds, find something that is applicable for the fellowship size. I think we all also talked about that this is a good chunk of money, but it could also be depleted very quickly. So be realistic about that and think about how you would allocate those funds. I think this one is really interesting. Partnerships are great. Show that you have already started those relationships, and that can be important as well. And then many people apply several times. And I think Jen mentioned that she had applied several times before she got the fellowship. We have one award to give out per year and many, many people that are interested in it. And that should not dissuade you from doing it, but perhaps you can learn each time, kind of focus in and hopefully get it the next time if you didn't get it the first time. So not too late to start on it now. And if if it doesn't come together this time, then certainly in the future. So with that, we would love to open it up to questions and hear from you all. I think, Kwong said this is sometimes the most kind of richness of the conversation, and you can learn from your other fellow potential applicants. So what questions do people have?
This is more just a point of interest. Does the whole history of fellows have an opportunity and ability to meet each other and come together? Does it become something that kind of accumulates over time?
That's a great question. I can answer from my perspective, but I don't know, Jen and Kwong, do you have Is there a cohort of past fellows that gets together?
I think it's a little casual, but there are once if you're selected as a fellow, there are a couple of kind of established moments for you to gather or present, and I think we've left it a little bit flexible depending on the specific fellowship recipient. But you will be given a chance to present at various points at the various kind of established events that the AFO puts forward. And oftentimes it's Erica or Susan who are like, hey, we're having this great event. Would you love to come up on stage and just share what you're working on? Share the proposal that was selected in front of a community. And of course, former fellows are often part of those communities. So there's this great kind of informal networking that happens. I will say that other fellowship recipients, not to say that I'm, but they've often said that part of the benefit is that you can say like, hey, I received this fellowship. It gives you an entree to email or to call people who were then much more receptive to like, oh, well, yes, they are working on this proposal that has been, selected for a fellowship. They found it to kind of like open doors, so to speak. So there's nothing so formal, but because of the reach of the AFO, particularly within this community, you'll find that, and I think you will find that doors kind of open when you're selected. There isn't like a badge or a secret handshake that you get, but there is kind of just like this informal community that arises, when you're selected for the fellowship.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we could come up with a secret handshake, but maybe that'll be new this year. Yeah, just to kind of to tack on to that, I think that's exactly what was on my mind as well, is that it is, I think, most formally or informally, you're a part of the AFO family at that point. I think that we have a really broad reach of audience members and people who are involved in all different stages of life, but certainly when folks have received the fellowship, when they have been honored an honored citizen, when they have received scholarships, there are kind of more just enhanced opportunities. And as we've talked about, and as you can see, both Jen and Kwong are both past fellows and they are on the selection committee, right? So I think nothing is required, but then there's this election of additional engagement within AFO to continue to give back in certain ways, to give back to other potential fellow applicants by serving on the selection committee or being involved in different ways. Like we talked about, Kwong is now on our board, and his entry point was through the fellowship. And so I think that it's really kind of entry into AFO as opposed to just this kind of fellowship community. And we didn't talk about it in detail, Kwong mentioned it, but we do have every year in about February, we have a fellowship reception where we hear from the previous fellow recipient. So the kind of year previous, to do a presentation of what they did with their fellowship, as well as hearing from the that coming year's selected recipients to talk about what they plan to do with the fellowship. So there is I think that that's the most formal kind of ask that we have for people, so that people, that audience can come in and see what's coming out of the fellowship. And then by default, several, if not most, of the previous fellowship recipients are there. So I think that that's probably one of the more formal settings of coming back together. Jen, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered it.
Great. What other questions?
I have a question about like how you guys are thinking about how you define the profession and community in how we're thinking about this as an Oregon-based organization. Is it, both of the examples seem very broadly applicable, right? To the profession and to like practice of architecture, throughout the whole US, for example, or even globally. I'm curious if there's, if that broad applicability is more preferred, or is like looking at a unique problem that Oregon is facing, or something unique to our communities, or the people who are practicing in Oregon or Portland, for example? Is that kind of local focus appropriate, or are you looking big picture, like big impact?
Can I jump in here? I was just thinking, last year's recipients, there were two of them, and both of their proposals, or both of their proposals had to do with very specific regional, I would say Portland, actually, not even regional, but Portland specific. And the year before, like, there's definitely more recently, I feel like it has come more of a micro instead of a macro. But when we're discussing it as a group, we definitely keep that in mind, right? And I don't think there's a benefit to one or the other. I think it really comes down to what your thing just went down. What you're proposing, how you're proposing to do it, and in the end, is it something that's feasible? Honestly, like that, it does come down to kind of feasibility. Is it something that you have because that is part of it, right? Do you have the expertise, the connections, have you shown in your past experience that you can kind of carry through with this? And then what is your plan to carry through with? So yeah, I definitely think that we see a good amount, both kind of larger scale, broader scale, but then definitely more community based. So
Kwang, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think Jen put it fantastically. I think the scale of the impact, I think kind of a little bit depends on the particular individual proposing whatever they are, whatever it is that they want to propose. And I think that there's a lot to be said for somebody who has extensive, deep reach within a network, but then there's also something to be said for somebody who wants to explore a topic that is perhaps a little bit more broader and, with a greater geographic applicability. And there isn't like I think there are professionals who do work that aims to kind of address both, or one or the other, and those are equally valid. And that's kind of what's amazing about architecture. You can have architectural practices that are quite broadly aimed and also quite specifically aimed, and there's always a little bit of both. So I think it's just a little bit, I would say, take a look at your particular experiences and where you feel like well equipped to address and make a really kind of stronger impact. And I think that's it, right? We're just kind of look like, yeah, like Jen said, is this is, $25,000 over a year. It weirdly goes fast. I know it's a lot. It sounds like a lot, or it can sound like a lot, but then you have to take into account taxes, and you have to take into account that most of you have jobs, or many applicants will have jobs, and they have to fit that within their professional and personal commitments as well. So it can be something that flies by a lot faster. And I think everybody who's won the award will say that. And it's like, it goes fast.
Yeah,
Super
and
helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to tack on a little bit from the kind of AFO broad perspective on your question, I think that we talk a lot about that AFO was started with architecture, right? It's the Architecture Foundation of Oregon, but then we have evolved as the understanding and the communication with the entire AEC community has evolved to serve all of the AEC community. And I always come back to, our Honored Citizen event that we have every year is rarely, and I have had the privilege of speaking with some of the founding members of AFO over the past few months of my time here. And the purpose of the Honored Citizen event was not to necessarily honor an architect or an engineer or a contractor every year, but to honor people and organizations that are supporting the entire sector surrounding it so that you could have a better sense of the fact that we do not exist in isolation. Certainly those three industries within the AEC industry don't exist in isolation. They all depend on one another to actually see the buildings, the built environment through. But we also need the support of the community around us to be able to see these things actually, make the impact that we mean for them to have. And so I want to, kind of draw further attention to that and apply it also to the VEB fellowship, that this is not just meant to be kind of it can be, to answer your question, but it can talk about kind of a microcosm of this sector, but it can also talk about the community as a whole, because the built environment touches every community, and we need to focus on that as well. So just again, from a full AFO perspective, not one above the other, but certainly both are considered to be highly valuable. Any other questions?
And if there's no questions, I was just going to comment, since I did apply several times. The first couple times, I don't know if it's changed, but the application said submit, examples of your work, or maybe not a resume, but examples of your work, right? But it said optional, and it didn't seem relevant to my topic of the proposal, so I didn't do it. And not in retrospect, but then I got some feedback that it made my application looked incomplete, and that next time you should put it in there, even if it didn't seem applicable, just so that people could see the breadth of your work. And that was just something I wanted to point out, because it wasn't necessarily clear, and I wouldn't have known if I hadn't gotten that feedback. And the other thing too was that during my fellowship, I did kind of hit a slump in the middle, where I felt like I wasn't moving forward with those, like milestones that I had thought. And I reached out to Erica Dunn, who was another previous fellow, and she was great, having gone through it before, and suggested, working with I was still 40 hours a week or more, working with my current situation with my boss, and trying to just carve out like a chunk of time, instead of just trying to do this like at night or on the weekends, just to devote like a mindset to it, and see if that would kind of make for some more progress, which it totally did. Just having time carved out and knowing that, this was devoted to it. And I think having the fellowship and the community knowledge around the value of it was really helpful for me to make that kind of pitch. So, and part of your budget can also go towards the time that you're taking off from work. So it wasn't like a complete loss situation.
Yeah, that's right. I think to address Jen's first point, because of the confusion about whether or not a portfolio was required, because it was considered optional, or we had kind of indicated it as optional in years prior, we no longer call it optional, and we ask for a portfolio. That being said, I will say that, we're not like a graduate school. We're not judging your body of work at this point. I will say a brief portfolio that demonstrates your ability to accomplish whatever task that you're proposing is kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for, again, like the committee is trying to judge, like, is this award going to be, kind of well shepherded through its entire timeline and with the resources provided. So if you can show a portfolio that demonstrates your ability to manage, whatever it is that you're proposing to do, that's kind of what we're looking for. That's no longer optional. We do ask for that because there was so much confusion around it. So to Jen's point, yeah, it's no longer optional. But the reason that we're looking at is not to, we're not judging your design, sensibilities. We're judging like, have you shown evidence of being able to shepherd projects, complicated projects, or aligned with what you are proposing this time around. Yeah, so that's regarding the portfolio part.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, as you get closer and closer to it, again, I'm new, so I might be asking other people to support, but please reach out, right? Please ask questions. You can tell that, again, AFO is this kind of this family where we're the entry point in wherever it is that you enter really allows you to kind of, come into this group of people who are really looking to support one another. We want to see the advancement of the field, of the built environment in whatever capacity, and we are here to help one another do that. And so if it's myself, if it's Kwang, if it's Jen, if it's somebody else who has gone through this process and is knowledgeable about it, we can help answer those questions. So I think if you're getting closer and closer to submitting your application and maybe have a question on it, please reach out and we'll be able to do our best to help you put it together. I think I have run in my kind of previous career, I ran a lot of business plan competitions and that kind of thing, and people so appreciate the process of putting together an application, putting together a business plan to really think things out. And so hopefully even the process of applying is beneficial to you, is something that allows you to kind of think through, well, hey, if I did have the time, if I did have some resources, what would I do to advance this field in a specific way? And I think that can potentially be a really kind of game-changing and professional changing activity, whether or not, again, that this 1 year is the year that you receive the fellowship. There are other opportunities within the future too. So I hope that you enjoy the process, that it's not too stressful, but that it is a opportunity for you to explore, for you to get creative. A lot of what Jen said is that, sometimes once you get into that early to mid level of your profession, a lot of that creativity has kind of gone out the window and it feels very project manager-y. And so let this be your outlet, right? Let this be the opportunity to get back into that kind of creative drive that brought us into creative fields. So like I said, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope it's not a stressor, but that it's an opportunity to kind of think outside the box and think of how you would do some things differently. So with that, any other questions? I don't want to cut anybody short, but I also don't need to stare at people and have people come up with questions. So are any other thoughts from the folks listening, or from Kwang or Jen, any kind of closing thoughts or additional questions? No? We got them all answered. We'll see everybody's applications tomorrow. We're ready.
Just thank you for the
Maybe not
time, for your
tomorrow.
perspectives.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Any
thank
closing
you.
thoughts from Jen or Kwang?
I mean, I thought the way you ended it was great. I kind of don't want to step on.
We're looking forward to hopefully seeing your applications. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you both for sharing your experiences and your and the process that you took on. And like I said, my email is on the website, so just please feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have.